You're getting 10-year-olds that are waking up one day and saying, well, their gender is male, but they're waking up and saying, well, I'm a female.
You're now tuned into LWC Radio Off the Record.
Welcome to LWC Radio, where we talk about topics that are fresh, real, and relevant, and most importantly, Mac, that they're off the record.
Yes, off the record. Welcome,
LWC
everybody.
Radio. Welcome, Mac, my co-host.
Thank you, Newton.
Good to have you back with us, and we hope that you enjoyed the last episode with Pastor Shane.
Our 10th episode.
10th
wow.
episode. Wow, yes, it's gone quick.
Number 11 already.
Yeah.
You guys just blinked and here we are again.
We're back.
It's funny enough, it feels like we recorded it just this morning.
It feels like that. It feels like that. Welcome to Level, who's our crew member at the back. Good to have you, Lebs. And we're excited for this episode. We've got an exciting guest.
Another exciting guest. We're on a roll here with guests, eh?
I know, yes. We're privileged to have these guests, and we're gonna be blessed.
And if you haven't tuned or subscribed, what are you waiting for?
Go for it.
Really, you don't like guests?
hit the subscribe button, and it'll keep you updated for the future episodes to come out. Yeah. Well, let's get going. We're going to introduce our next guest, and our next guest has been married for 34 years and has 2 children and 2 grandchildren. He's an author and has published a book titled Get Out of Your Rut and Into Your Groove. As a motivational speaker, he has addressed audiences and at conferences and seminars on 4 continents. He began his career in South Africa Air Force in 1981, qualifying as an aircraft technician. He has run his own business, obtained a diploma at Bible College, and served as a senior pastor of a church. He is currently the CEO of Accelerated Education Enterprises South Africa, an organization providing educational materials and services to schools on the African continent.
Wow, did you have to hold your breath to say all of that?
That was a lot. I didn't realize when I wrote that bio. I was like, it's a lot to read. Let's welcome Graham Yoker.
Yeah.
Graham. Good to have you with us.
Thanks so much, Newton.
Welcome.
Thanks, Mac. Good to be with you.
Were you holding your breath?
Well, absolutely. You did say I had 2 children. Well, I've got 3
now. Wow.
Yeah, I've got 3.
I got it wrong.
You don't know which one you left out, so
that's fine. And it was off the record.
Off the record. I got 3.
3 children. Sorry about that.
No problem.
2 grandchildren.
2 grandchildren.
As far as you know.
The most amazing young people in the world.
Can you imagine? It's a privilege to have them, eh?
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. And you based in Durban, hey?
We're based in Durban.
Welcome to Joburg. How's the weather this side compared to down there?
It's a little cooler. Definitely a little cooler. I had to take out my jacket for the first time when I came up to Joburg. So good to be here, and I enjoy the fresh air.
Awesome. Nice to see you.
Fresh
Thank
day
you.
Today,
Yeah.
So good to.
You guys are looking very tough with all your T-shirts on and so on. Here I am with my long sleeves. So.
We just advertising, that's all.
Subliminal messaging.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Uncle Graham. It's good to have you this side of the world in Joburg with us. And we've got an exciting topic that we're going to be talking about. And we can't wait to get into that and just have a conversation, a discussion together about something we feel is interesting and relevant, and I guess it's fresh. We're going to try and make it fresh. Yeah. And before we go into the topic, we're going to just crash down on a bit of history. You know, Trevor Yoker and Val Yoker were your mom and dad, and they pioneered and mentored many like Pastor Shaney and Pastor Jack at our church, and pioneered Christian education in South Africa, and were a great influence amongst a lot of people in around South Africa and the world. And I want to know, from how did your parents get involved with Christian educations per se in South Africa, and then going into Scandinavia? And I think it's not only in South Africa, it's in Africa.
Africa as well.
As well. So I want to know, how did your parents become to get to that point of saying, hey, we want to get Christian education going down here in South Africa?
Newton, it's an interesting story because, my dad, for those of you who knew him, He is a visionary, one of those can-do people, and nothing was ever too big of an obstacle for him. And he was actually busy building a Bible college down in Newcastle in Northern Natal. And he was working with one other person, and he says that he heard the Lord, or he heard a voice say to him, build a Christian school. And he immediately looked around to see who was talking to him, and there was nobody else that could have been speaking to him. And so he said, this must be God speaking to me. And so immediately what he did was find out the first thing that he could about Christian schools. And it was at that point that he came across the Accelerated Christian Education Program, went and got trained, and began to prepare to start a Christian school in Newcastle at that time, not knowing that only a few years later he would be pioneering Christian education into the rest of Africa as well. So once again, hearing from God and obeying, which was a trait that he lived by, together with my mom, who supported him.
Wow. Can I just mention that because of that decision, now most people might not know, I grew up in Venda, and back in 1993, I think your dad spoke to a man called Pastor Brad Palmer, and they started a school in Shandima. I was one of the first applicants to be accepted there because he obeyed that call. And here I am, and I'm 38 now, and I haven't been through the system. And now here I am interviewing you because of something your dad started then. So it's quite incredible to actually have you sitting right here. And I'm a product of that call that he decided he's going to go. So it's amazing, yeah. So I'm privileged to actually have you sit here, because now I'm like, thanks to your dad and obeying that call, I got through the system, and this is what the Lord has done in my life. So it's quite incredible.
Yeah, and Mac, if you think about where Venda is,
yes,
it's kind of like the furthest place from Durban.
Yeah,
and somebody was given a piece of land in Venda, and they contacted my dad and said, I've got a piece of land in Venda, what do you think we should do? And he said, let's build a school.
Wow.
And so I remember trips backwards and forwards from Durban, 18-hour trips to get up there to build a school. People said, why didn't you just build one in Durban? Well, God led us to go to Venda, and the rest is history.
Wow.
You're part of history.
Yes, I'm part of history, so it makes me...
When did they start the Christian education in South Africa specifically?
It started in probably about 1983, and at that stage it was Ashton Sparrow and his wife Grace that were involved in heading up Accelerated Christian Education. And so my dad got involved by interacting with them at that point. And then sadly, Ashton developed some health challenges and couldn't continue. And Dr. Howard, the founder of Accelerated Christian Education, asked my dad whether he'd be willing to step into the role of leading the growth of the ministry here. And basically, he just went around and shared the vision of Christian education with folks in churches. Wow. There are schools that are still running today as a result of those meetings that he would have in those early days.
Sure.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And now 18 years from 1983, if I'm doing my math correctly, no.
1983, no, that's about 37 years.
Yeah, 37 years down the line now. You are heading up Christian education in South Africa. And how did that happen? How did you get involved? And tell us a bit more about that.
So, Newton, I think it's all about identity and who it is that you are.
Yeah.
And I remember being a kid, and my dad would say to me, what would you like to be? And I said, I want to be a marcher and a preacher. Okay, a marcher being a soldier and preacher being a preacher. And I did end up going to the Air Force at that time and sort of fulfilled that part of the prophecy, and then got involved in ministry and then Christian education. Because when my dad had taken over the running of ACE, suddenly there was a growth in the number of schools that were registering, and he couldn't handle it on his own. He was out sharing the vision and the message, and so he needed somebody to be at home taking care of the administration and so on. And that was the gifting that I had. And so stepped into the role of administrator at that particular time. Sure. And that led me along a path where I worked together with him, did training all over the continent, all over Africa, and then also, as you mentioned in the introduction, pastored a church for 6 years.
Yeah.
But it was at the end of those 6 years that my dad just suddenly, one Saturday morning, had a heart attack and died. And I remember standing there thinking, what on earth is going to happen now? Because he's the visionary, and I'm the administrator. And I just remember the Lord saying, everything's going to be fine. It's all going to work out. And had to step into the leadership role at Accelerated Christian Education at that time. And to be perfectly honest, I felt almost like a kid at a school play. That's sort of, the curtains are opened, you pushed out into the front of the stage, and the curtains closed, and it was like, there it is. You go ahead. And I had to begin to determine, is this what God's called me to do? Or am I just doing it because I'm Trevor's son?
Yeah.
And it took me 3 or 4 years in that position, because those first couple of years were just brutal in terms of getting things into some sort of
because I must say, it must not have been easy, because as you mentioned, your dad was more the visionary guy, you more the administrative guy. So how did you find the transition, having to carry what he would have done compared to maybe bringing your own ideas? Was that easy to still link up the ideas that you have in order to how to carry this thing forward, but also maintaining how your dad would have done something? Or did you just decide, nah, I'm going to just do it my own way? Or how was the transition from that, or blending the two visions or ideas and carrying it? Was that very challenging for you, and how did you overcome that?
Mac, I think, particularly for those listening, is we need to understand that God has created us each uniquely. All right, so I can never be my dad. And I remember even when we traveled together and so on, I would say publicly, and together we would have this discussion, is that I am not my dad, and I'm not going to die trying to be him. All right. So we were very open about that. We were two completely different, we are two completely different people. So the way I would see things and visualize things were totally different from the way that he would see them. He would just, look at something and say, there's no problem, let's go and do it. Where I would say, no, hang on, there's this problem and that problem and this problem. And so I think there's a need for both of those. But what I found very challenging during those early days was being in a position where I didn't want to dishonor my dad with him not being there. And so not come in and suddenly just say, we're not doing that anymore because I want to do it this way, but honoring what God had done through him, and then saying, how can we improve on this? How can we add to it so that it's even better? And I think that's a great challenge in society today, is the issue of dishonor. Is kind of like, I want to be the hero, I'm the person, if you'll just get out of the way, I can be that superstar. But I believe taking the time to slowly transition and be who I am, couldn't be false to myself, but at the same time not dishonoring the foundation and the vision that he set in motion, which was fantastic.
Wow.
You think that you had more pressure for trying to continue the legacy that he left behind, or was that something that you weren't too sure, you just take it day by day? Or
Newton, the Bible says that one person lays the foundation, and there's only one foundation, it's Christ Jesus. But we need to be careful how we build on that foundation. And that's how I tended to view it in those days, was to say, Dad has laid a foundation that's been built on Christ, and what I'm going to build on here is only going to be for a season. Then someone's going to take over from me. And each one of us need to build so that it fits into the original plan, as opposed to, if you had 3 different architects designing the same building, you'd have a mess. So it's building into what's already been done, and making it your own. Not, I often have a situation where I think, what would Dad do here? No, we're not going to do that. Because some of the things that he did were not the right things in my perspective. But
it would have been interesting to see in today's day and age how he would have reacted to certain things, with social media. And I think he would have been quite ruthless, to be honest. He would have given us. He's probably looking down from heaven and saying, "Yo, if I was in that position,
exactly, I would do this, or I would do that, and so on."
I mean, you mentioned one of the things about identity there, and would you say there's definitely an attack in today's world on our identity? and with regards to the way things happened then to what's happening now. So would you say there's a definite attack on our true identity in the world today?
Mac, I think it goes without saying is that people are more confused today than they've ever been. They are frustrated. They lack foundations and roots. And so there's so many different opinions, and I'm trying to figure out who I am, but I'm being told who I should be. And so that sort of erodes the very foundation that I'm trying to build on. And Dr. Miles Monroe said something. He said, when purpose is unknown, then abuse is inevitable. And I think today that purpose is missing in society. It's kind of like get all you can, earn as much money, look successful, but are you actually doing what God's called you to do? And it's that issue. If you look at the issues of identity today, it's got to do with your race, it's got to do with your gender, it's got to do with your history, it's got to do with the things that you've lived through or whatever. And there's so many challenges that I think a lot of people are confused.
Yeah.
Who am I? You know.
I think the other problem that I'm seeing, and I want to just pose this question to you. You said the identity is different facets, like you've got race, you've got that. Do you think young people today, in terms of choosing what career they want, because that also defines your identity now that we're talking about school side of things. So in ACE, do you think that the kids have more clear knowledge of what they want to do in terms of this is what they should choose? Or is it something that we also telling them, okay, this is what you need to choose when you grow up? Or are they given the freedom to decide what I want to do when I'm done with school?
Yeah, I think it's not so much the ACE program. I think what the ACE program does is it gives a solid biblical foundation for the student to build on.
Yeah.
But what often happens is that parents, well-meaning parents, could start directing a student or a child in a specific direction that is perhaps what they wanted to be, but couldn't get to be it. And so now they're trying to live that out through their children. And I think it's so critical for us to give a solid foundation, an academic foundation, a spiritual foundation, but then to almost let the person begin to find out who they are. Yeah. And it's a simple thing. You know, people say, well, how do I determine my identity? What are you good at? Yeah. You know, when you do something, do people say, man, you did a fantastic job? Or do they say, don't ever do that again?
You know? And you know you got a problem.
Yeah. So if they say, don't do it again, tick that off as, I shouldn't do that. You know, if you had to ask me to sing on a stage, all right, you'd be offended by my voice because I'm not a singer. All right, but if you ask me to get up and speak to people, I'm comfortable doing that. Wow. So guess what? I don't sing.
I think I'm in the same boat as you because I think we get chased off.
But that doesn't make you wrong.
No,
it just is. What we find today is that too many people are spending their lives trying to fit into a mold that they were never designed or destined to be.
You know, even, so with that, like with parents, like what if I feel like I'm not fulfilling my identity because I'm not what my parents envisioned for me, but I want to do what I want to do, and then maybe I'm successful at that, but they're always looking around at me now, you know, you could have been that. So how do I deal with being content with that? Because now I'm feeling like, wait, did I do the right thing? Because here I'm doing what I love, but this is not what my parents want. And sometimes they make you feel that, okay, you should have chosen that career. But sometimes to the extent where they don't even support you where you are because that's not what they envisioned for you. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think it's again, the family working together and for parents to be very sensitive to what their children are good at, all right, what they enjoy. I mean, I speak from my own experience. My two daughters are university graduates. My son is a professional drummer. Now, immediately when you think about that, you think, oh, well, the university graduates are the more accomplished. Yeah. Well, says who? You know?
It's a perception.
Yeah. And so because you're not a university graduate, it sort of diminishes your value in the world's eyes. And I'm saying, no, he's doing an amazing job with his drumming as a musician, and he's learnt other skills that the university graduates haven't. So what I've seen as a parent is basically encouraging children and our young people in the strengths that God has blessed them with.
Yeah.
So give them an opportunity to go and check out what is great. What do they love doing? What don't they love doing?
Yeah, I think it's. I want to ask you, Uncle Graham, is what is identity? How can we define identity for me as a person? If we define that, what is that? What is identity?
Okay, so if you take it down to its lowest common form, would be your identity document. All right, that you have, or your card. It's got a fingerprint, it's got your picture, it's got a unique number. It's you. Nobody else is like you. Even identical twins are different. All right. So what we tend to do, and what the system tends to do, even an education system, it tends to group people together because of their age. So because you're this age, you should all be doing the same thing at the same time. And that nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
You know, somebody with who's 12 years old could have a mental capacity of 16 or 9 years old and be perfectly normal. But when you put them all together in the same class, the one that's got the mental capacity of 16 is going to say, "You guys are slow." You know.
Yeah.
So the identity that we have is, firstly, I believe it's the identity comes from the Word of God. Is that He says in Psalm 139, He knew you before you were conceived, and He knew every single day of your life before you ever lived one.
Yeah.
And He wrote that down in His book. So to me, it's getting into line with God's plan for our lives, not our parents' plan or the world's plan or social media's plan. But what does God say about me?
Yeah. So if I don't subscribe to Christianity and I'm listening, how do I then define my identity?
Well, I think it's Mac. It's not a case of just being around a faith-based situation. You would know when you're doing something whether you are great at it or not. All right. And I believe each of us have our own identity. All three of us sitting here have had different backgrounds, and we've got different points of reference. I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up in a home where my dad and mom were in ministry most of their entire lives. I grew up in church. Okay, and I think maybe you had the same experience, Newton, but perhaps I don't know what your experience was.
Yeah. My dad was a Roman Catholic pastor. He
Right.
was once not a high priest. My mom sort of followed him because that was the norm, but she later ventured into Pentecostal things. So I mostly grew up around church, but I never really knew what Christianity was because I just got dragged to church, and just one of those things you do, but without really ever fully getting into it. So at a young age, I never really understood what my identity was in terms of Christianity. So I just always thought it's what I do, it's the kind of friends I have, it's the sports I like, or the food I like, or the music I like, that kind of thing. So I never really knew it from that perspective, obviously, until I grew up and understood the Christian point of view of things. Yeah.
So I just want to why are people in society, and when I talk about people, you're getting 10-year-olds that are waking up one day and saying, well, they gender is male, but they're waking up and saying, well, I'm a female. What is going on, and why are they struggling with that identity?
Well, I think that you find if the foundation is missing, it's very difficult to have a secure base from which to have a departure point. So no matter what you believe, that's what you are using as your set of values. And I think that young people today are being offered so many options that instead of helping them understand their sexuality or their gender, it's actually bringing about confusion. And I think identity confusion is pandemic. Never mind the COVID virus, but identity confusion is pandemic around the world. Wow! Because how do you wake up and just say, "Well, today I'm something totally different than I was yesterday"? And again, coming back to that, if your purpose is not known, then abuse is inevitable. And there's enough systems out there to spur on that abuse, to make you feel you don't fit in. I'm always wondering, somebody who goes through a situation like that, do they really believe that when they are claiming to be one gender or the other, that they are happy, that they are, really so comfortable. The experiences I've had, and I've had first-hand experience of a young man claiming that he's a young woman, but his life has just gone downward. The spiral has been downward, not because of anything. I haven't even spoken to him, but his life has become a downward spiral. It's not. If it was supposed to be, well, this is it, then he would be having a great time.
Yeah, so I've always wondered, as a parent, how do you respond to that kind of thing, though? Like your child comes one day and says, Dad, I think I'm a girl now. Like, how do you respond to that kind of thing as a parent? Because that's obviously something you've never taught your child, but the world is actually doing that. So what kind of advice would you say to parents? How would you respond to that? Because obviously, like, I'm talking off the record. As a black parent, my daughter decides, Dad, I like girls. I'm going to give her the belt. I'm like, where did you get that kind of nonsense? We don't do that in this house. But my thought, because initially that's the way I was brought, like, that's just rubbish, man. Don't even entertain that thought. But now today you get people telling, no, you got to be sensitive to their needs, listen to them. But my upbringing doesn't tell me to just tells me that's rubbish, cut it off immediately. Yeah. So nowadays, modern parents, how would you advise them to respond to that kind of thing when you encounter a child suddenly saying, I want to be a different gender?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
And, probably is a podcast on its own in terms of that. But once again, it's reaffirming God's design.
Yeah.
All right. The Bible says in Genesis, He made them male and female. All right. He didn't make a mistake. He didn't confuse the people. He said male, and Adam and Eve were male and female.
Yeah.
And I think that when we come back to that reference point, it doesn't necessarily have to be my interpretation of what I think my child is. It's what has God made you, And again, He knew you from the day before you were conceived. And then in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, it goes on to say that we are His masterpiece and that we've been created for good works that He ordained before the beginning. So if we're His masterpiece, I don't see God making a mess. It's kind of like, did we let that one out without, determining what they are? No. No. Yeah. Male and female. That's what the Bible says.
And I think a clear indication, as you said, is if you're seeing your life drastically and you've seen it from first-hand experience going downhill, already it's an indicator to say, hey, look, I need to reassess what's going on here, because obviously, God wants to bless you. He's created you as the masterpiece.
Yes.
Already in saying that, it's given me a purpose, and it's a clear indication to say, look, I need to change something.
Yeah.
Whether it's my gender, whether it's my race, it's I think it's quite interesting.
But don't you think that we live in a society that gives us so many options that there's almost confusion in terms of what I should choose?
Yeah, I think what do you think the impacts then of social media have on youngsters in terms of how they get their identity? Because they're obviously being defined by the world around us, and social media is such a big part of their lives, our lives. How do you feel that social media affects a youngster's identity or people's identity?
I think it has a huge impact on identity today as a concept, because you could encounter something on social media that changes the way that you look at yourself, and it can be fake news.
Yeah.
And suddenly you start seeing yourself as inferior. You start seeing yourself as incompetent or whatever it might be. But when you understand, and that's when I wrote the book, Get Out of Your Rut and Into Your Groove, the rut is doing everything that the world or society or social media wants you to do, and you feel totally uncomfortable doing it, but you've got to put on the brave face. The groove is getting into the direction that God has ordained for you and just beginning to enjoy being who God made you to be. So the impact of social media is enormous. And what makes it worse is that parents are kind of leaving children to just handle social media on their own. A lot of that is hidden. It's not out in the open. And so there's not discussion or dialogue taking
But
place.
how much of social media has influenced what people are doing as opposed to what they love? Like, what are the percentages to the people that are actually now doing what they're passionate about, or what the influence they've got from something else? Like, do you have a lot of people who are now just doing things that they're not really passionate about because of the pressures that they were in? How much of those people is it? Like, what are the ratios in terms of those people?
Well, I think the statistics that are bandied around, and I'm glad it's called off the record.
Yes.
Because, but plus 60 to 70%
Yeah.
of people around the world have gone to the wrong job today
Yeah.
because of the pressure that's been put on them. So IT is the big buzzword at the moment. If you want to get rich, if you want to get famous, go into IT. That's what's
Because of
going to make it
lockdown,
happen.
now everybody's now suddenly, with everything going online and computers and Zoom and all that stuff. Yeah.
These guys that are doing podcasts and
Yes.
stuff like that. You know?
Off the record.
So we would have a discussion like this normally
Yes.
in the company of people. Yeah, we are three of us talking in a room, and people all over the
World
country
are
and perhaps the
listening,
world are going to see it.
Yeah, I think, and when we're talking about identity and how we are defined, it's a lot. It's got a lot to do with where you've come from, and a lot of people, you come from an educational system that defines you, and so how does the education system in today, how is that affecting and defining kids as they're growing up now? Would you say that it should be because it's a conventional system? Would you say that it's shifting towards creating a field where guys explore a little bit more and not get defined by a certain curriculum or a career path?
I definitely feel that education has lagged behind. If you look at the progression in motor vehicles, for instance, from the early horse-drawn carriage to the electric vehicles we're seeing today, from the old phone that you used to wind up to the cell phone that everybody has. And yet education has pretty much stayed the same. And the focus has been around achieving a qualification that allows you to get into an institute of higher learning, that allows you to get a degree or whatever it might be, and that should set you in good stead to go and make a success of your life. But here's an interesting thing. I visited a school in Canada, and I was talking to some of the high school students. And I said to this one girl, I think she was in grade 11, I said, what are you planning to do with your life once you leave school? She said, I'm going to start a company to collect garbage in space. I laughed, just like you. I tried not to laugh in her face. But guess what? It's a real thing.
Sure.
Because there's garbage in space. Was a young lady who was thinking, what is life going to look like 10 years from now? And I'm getting an education that is almost putting me in the dark ages, because they tell us that knowledge is, IBM did a study, and they say that knowledge is doubling every 12 hours. You think of artificial intelligence and everything that's happened, every 12 hours, the amount of knowledge is doubling. All right? So asking another guy, I said, well, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to be working out a way to drill for minerals on asteroids.
Wow.
And I really thought, I don't know what they're giving these kids here, because that's some weird stuff. Well, I got back home, and about 2 months later, I read a newspaper report that said the Japanese have just landed a probe on an asteroid to check if they can drill for minerals.
Wow.
So the education system is not moving with the developments that are happening around us.
I think before we go, I want to find out from you, Uncle Graham, is that we're going to talk about maybe some tips that you have to find your identity and how you can help those that are watching that might be struggling with their identity. But while we were talking about the space, I thought it would be quite interesting to talk about Elon Musk.
Yes.
And I don't know if you're familiar with recently he's been launching rockets left, right, and center, and it's really
So he's contributing to the space garbage.
Well, that's what I thought about. He's actually probably leaving garbage up there that we don't know about, and she's gonna go and claim it. So thank you, Elon Musk. And interesting. He's just launched his Starship. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah.
He's had a few trials and they've gone wrong, but this is the first one he's been able to launch and land autonomously. And the idea is to launch humans into space, do space trips, all sorts of things. And I actually want to just show you one. I've got the video here of the recent landing. We're gonna just watch it quickly. So this is this thing is 50 meters in height.
Yeah.
This rocket, 9 meters in diameter. So he's basically launching a tower or a building into the sky. I'm gonna just fast forward here. So that's the launch. And what's quite amazing is how they actually put that thing vertically.
Oh, and that's it landing backwards.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's him landing. And it's quite incredible to just see the magnitude of that rocket, which is 50 meters high.
Yeah.
Eh?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine seeing that thing up close? I think it's quite amazing to see that he's launching.
Where do you think a guy like that got his identity from? What do you think shapes a person like that identity? Like the people in Canada, you were saying that's what they want to do. Now you've got a very own South African guy, and I'm sure the teachers must have thought, Elon, the ideas you've got, boy, just come down to earth, just like chill.
One of the interesting things about Elon Musk that I just want to mention is that his brother was actually giving a report and actually said that Elon Musk used to read 2 books a day. So if you had to read 1 book a month, like most people do,
Yeah.
he's reading 60 times more books than you are.
Yeah.
In a year, and or however they worked it out. And I just thought that was incredible. One of the main things they saw that when he read these books, what his brother was saying is that Elon Musk used to take a mathematical book and he used to read the whole book and he would jump straight into politics, or he would jump straight into biology.
Right.
Or so he was reading a variety of information and resources, I guess, that he had. But he obviously was clever as well. I want to know from you, Uncle Graham, when do you think we're going to have another Elon Musk being produced from the South African education?
Well,
Or should I ask, when is it possible?
I think it's possible if we become imaginal in our thinking.
Yeah.
And don't get boxed in by a curriculum, by a classroom, by a simple way of thinking that's always been there. You know, Einstein said that's insanity, is you do the same thing over and over and expect different results. That's what we do in education.
Yeah.
That's what we do in Joburg.
You just keep on doing the same thing over and over. And we've got to change our way of thinking, our way of doing. Yeah. When I looked at that clip, it reminded me of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
You know, the people got bored with being on the ground. And so they said, let's build a tower. And the Bible actually says that God got nervous because he said, whatever they put their minds to, they're going to achieve. And if you think of the money that's gone into developing all this stuff while people die of hunger around the world, that could easily be remedied. You know, that's what I'm saying. When you talk about purpose, is my purpose to get people onto Mars? And if so, how many will I be able to get there?
Yeah.
And what difference is it going to make to the world as such? Are we all moving to Mars? If that was going to happen, God would have put us there in the beginning.
Yeah.
But we can very easily be diverted in our purpose and make it sound very academic, make it sound right. But I believe that we've got to say, God, what do you want us to do? And that's the hard part.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
I think we define ourselves like pretty much. I mean, God's got an amazing future, an amazing stuff planned for us. And we define it by, okay, well, we're going that route. And I think, like, if you look at Elon Musk's case, I mean, God gave him the ability to do multiple things. And I think God's given most of us that ability. It's just we define ourselves by one thing.
Yeah.
That's all we know.
Which
So-
is sad because nowadays, like in South Africa, a lot of kids are defined by what they see in social media. Like they want to be rap artists, they want to be music producers, they want to be DJs. Nobody's ever dressing up like a doctor or a scientist or stuff like that because that stuff just doesn't look cool.
Yeah.
But do you think it's because they're shying away from the hard work that associate with that? Because nowadays I can just get into my computer and load up a couple of beats. Suddenly I think I'm a music producer.
Yes.
But studying scientist and being a doctor, it's not that easy. Do you think young people today are not prone to working hard as opposed to what young people used to do then as to now?
It's like anything, whether it's sport or business.
Yeah.
Or, there's a couple of high flyers, and
Yeah.
everybody uses them as the measuring stick.
Yeah.
All right. If you think of golf, for instance, the amount of people that actually make it onto the golf tour compared to the amount that play golf,
Yeah.
it's a very small percentage.
Yeah.
And so, what do those other people do while they feeling sad and miserable that they aren't on the golf tour? They're losing their lives.
Yeah.
They're missing out on God's plan. And I use the analogy of a piece of string. So if you could imagine this piece of string, here's birth, here's death.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a straight piece of string, and that's God's plan for your life. Now, we start out over here because we don't really have any ability to do anything but be cared for by our parents. But then the minute we start getting our own understanding, our basis for our identity and so on, and let's say, for instance, it's shaped by social media, the DJ. Well, I start moving away from God's plan, and I'm a moderate
Yeah.
DJ where I could have been an amazing doctor.
Yeah.
Okay, but because the influence is there, and then I come down this way and I change, and it's usually when I cross that line that I'm feeling, wow, I'm in that groove. But depending on who I'm listening to, I do another loop, and so I keep on going up and down. And I'm having these little moments of excitement and joy, but the majority of my life is far from God's plan. And so if you want to find that identity, finding the identity is, show me your ways, Lord. Show me
Yeah.
what you designed me to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, those that are watching that are saying, I'm struggling with my identity. I'm struggling to find who I am, what I am. What kind of advice would you give those that are listening?
I think it's critical to determine what your point of departure is. For me, the point of departure is God's word. And so when I start feeling different to what God's word says, I can go back to and say, yeah, but that's what God said about me.
Yeah.
He said, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. He didn't make a mistake. So where I'm at, what I'm experiencing is because I've moved away from his plan. And so I would encourage people to ask the simple questions is, what do I do well? I often use the analogy of a puzzle piece. It's got a protruding section and it's got a void.
Yeah.
And if you've ever done a strengths test or strengths and weakness test, you get a result and you see all the weaknesses and you go and try and fix the weaknesses
Yeah.
instead of maximizing the strengths.
strength.
So the protruding section is what you're good at. The void is what other people are good at. But together you make a picture,
Yeah.
and that picture is what God has created for us.
Wow. That's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I'm inspired. And yeah, thank you. And I'm glad I was part of the history from what your dad started. Yeah.
Yeah.
A bit of a different subject in terms of from where you've come from educational, but I think it's so critical because I think families are struggling with identity, and especially children are struggling with
Yeah.
their identity. And so I really hope that those of you who are watching today found some nuggets in that conversation
Yeah.
and what Uncle Graham was saying. And I know I found something.
Yeah, food for thought. You left us with a lot of food for thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but truth is what it is, and it's off the record. But yeah,
Yeah, it's off the record, so there's no problem.
Yeah.
And if you want to leave us a comment in the comment section, let us know what you
Yes.
thought of the episode. We just want to thank you, Uncle Graham, for being with us, just giving your time and just having a discussion and giving us some of your wisdom. We really appreciate it. And yeah,
Thanks so much, Newton. Thanks, Mac.
thank you, Uncle
You know,
Graham.
my passion
Yeah.
is seeing people guided to their purpose.
Wow.
That's what my life exists to do. And if this has helped to do that,
Yes.
Yeah.
then we've hit the
I'm
top.
a living testimony of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, we both are.
Yeah, both
Yeah.
are actually.
Definitely.
Oh,
Well, enjoy the rest of your evening.
yes.
And we'll see you next week on
Yes.
LWC
See
Radio.
the number
off
one
the
Christian radio station in where in the world? Alberton? Yeah. Well, number one wherever we want to because it's off the record. You can't argue.
We are the number one
Yeah.
Christian radio.
and Mars.
Yes, and Mars.
Mars.
Past the space garbage.
Yeah, pass the space from me. Awesome. We'll see you next week. Cheers for now.
Bye.